We're back, and I'm going to kind of attempt to take this home. One of the things about speaking last, and I feel like I say this more and more. Everybody else that goes in front of you is so talented, and to be able to listen just to Nick's presentation right there, and to hear his experiences, and to know how talented they are in Baltimore. And like I'm learning things as he's talking, or actually reflecting, saying, well, I wish I would have done that, or I wish I did more of that. And so and Q touched on a lot of things. Nick touched on a lot of things, and I think a lot of it was very method based, and they have deep rooted principles. And I've been very very lucky to have the experiences that I've had in my career of working with the Dodgers for 12 years. I worked in the military for 2 years before that as a strength coach. I worked for the Pirates for 3 years. I was a college baseball player, not a very good one, but I was super passionate about it. And then, played high school baseball, obviously, to get to that point. Like everything leads you to where you are. And where I sit now is less, it's less sets and reps. It's more of coordinating, collaborating, creating discussions, creating vision. And then within that, in professional baseball, I think everybody looks at the guys on TV. They look at the guys that are 24 to 35 that play in the big leagues. And for the longest time, I thought that's what training was. And then started getting involved in the amateur draft. Started to see like what an 18-year-old kid is going through, and what are we actually talking about when and I don't mean from a strength coach standpoint, but from a baseball standpoint, what are we talking about? And then even further, now we get into Latin America, we're starting to look at 14, 15, 16-year-old kids and trying to figure out, like, how do they get to the big leagues? Then I had kids of my own. Now I got 3 boys. I got a almost 10-year-old, I got an 8-year-old, and I got a 4-year-old. I have the coolest perspective to watch a 4-year-old learn how to climb a rope, and to watch, a 35 or 36. JD Martinez last year was 35. Clayton Kershaw was 35. They were probably the two. Daniel Hudson, 36 years old, probably the oldest guys on the team, right? So here I am, 10 a.m. in the morning in the summers, going to gymnastics class, watching my 4-year-old try to climb a rope, and then coming that night and watching Clayton Kershaw or JD Martinez go about their work. And so it's opened up kind of my horizons to the spectrum and how important it is. And there's a wide variety of people on this Zoom. There's a wide variety of people in this room. And, the first slide that I typically put up is this one, which is, it takes a village. Okay. It takes a village to be able to work with your athletes. But for people on this Zoom, for most people on this Zoom that aren't in professional baseball, that don't have a village, you're the village. So you got to take a little bit. You got to be a little bit of a biomechanist. You've got to be able to have a relationship with an ortho. If somebody has pain, you got to send them somewhere. To be able to be a pitching coach, even though you maybe didn't pitch. To be the strength coach. Okay. And I feel like right now it's kind of hot to be a strength coach. Like everybody, whether they're a pitching coach or a hitting coach, everybody kind of wants to talk about strength. Okay, that's pretty cool for us. It's pretty cool for guys that have been strength coaches for a long time to be able to have that, because now we have some real conversations. If you're not a physical therapist, I recommend you find a physical therapist that you feel really close to and that you trust, because they're going to be able to do soft tissue on an athlete. They're going to be able to help you with rehabs. They're going to be able to help you with prehabs. And more than anything, what I've realized, and I do work with a lot of high school athletes in LA, is parents want peace of mind. And they want to be able to know that they're safe, that their kids are safe, that they're putting them in good hands. And I've found some really good relationships with the physical therapists that I work with, the Dodgers, physical therapists that I work with in LA. That is probably my most important relationship. They understand movement very well, and more importantly, they can put their hands on somebody to work with. Athletic trainers, The oldest profession, I think, in what we do, extremely, extremely important. And they have a job that no one else can do. And that's making sure that they create a safe environment on the field for you and your athletes. And so, and then lastly, like, we are all sports scientists. Please delineate between sports tech. Okay. Anybody can do sports tech. Okay. Sports tech is not the answer. Sports tech is part of the solution, but it is not the answer. But a sports scientist is a person who takes information, they take data, they take data points, they use their eyes to make really good decisions and do that in a way that moves them forward, whether that's a training session, a pitching session, a game, a season, a career. That's a sports scientist. A sports scientist doesn't have to be something fancy. So you are all sports scientists. And then lastly, I graduated high school with 275 pounds. Okay, I was a big boy. Okay. Nutrition was not, it was actually the most important thing in my life because all I wanted to do was eat. But I soon realized that nutrition was going to be my limiting factor, not only in baseball, but in my life. And so we all need to be a little bit of, if you don't have access to a nutritionist, and we got to listen to Beth speak, who was unbelievable. If you don't have one, you need to learn some basic things to be able to help your athletes. And so again, it takes a village, and I realize everybody on this call doesn't have a village. Okay. And so if you are the one man or one woman band, make sure that you get a little bit of these relationships created. But most importantly, it's about the athlete. Okay. As we sit here and talk today, we are talking about what we do. We're talking about what, performance coaches do, strength coaches do, nutrition coaches. Coach got up here and gave a very passionate speech. Like, I was ready to go run through that wall. I was like, I want to play for UT. I got a semester left of eligibility. And he made it very clear. It's about the athlete. And if we can make them feel good, if we can put them in a position where they feel good about themselves, they feel like they can perform, they can go out and perform very, very, very well. And that's where it always comes back to, is if we're doing things that are making them better, we have a chance. We have a chance in our own careers, and they have a chance in their careers. So that's what the village is surrounding. I always like to kind of go into these things, and we'll be quicker than I normally give this speech, but what a success. Like, I want you to leave here and realize this: every great player is great for a reason. Whether it's a high school player, college player, a pro player, everybody has a superpower. And superpower is kind of something that we talk a lot about with the Dodgers. I have an unbelievable staff. Continuity is the most important thing to me. I've been with two gentlemen, Travis Smith and Brian Stoneberg, our director of minor league performance and our major league strength coach, for 12 years. Okay, going on 13. Eric Yavarone, some of you know, who presented over at the joint presentations in Nashville, been with him for almost 9 years. Continuity is the most important thing to me. And we talk about superpowers a lot, because I feel like we live in a world, I don't mean talking about baseball here, I'm not talking about strength conditioning. We live in a world where everybody wants to point out everything that's wrong with you. Okay, social media has taught us we need to point out everything that you do wrong. So we talk about what you do right. We talk about your strengths, and I've done this in a way, this presentation, broken it down into 3 Marvel characters, because I think it relates to kids. I think it relates to parents, that they understand those a little bit better than when we get up here and talk about elasticity or force production or rate of force production or ground reaction forces or whatever. That's all really cool stuff. I like to play with figurines when I was a kid. So I really like Batman too. And so I try to, relate things to that. We'll talk about how to identify those powers. If we have time, we'll talk about how to enhance those powers. Quick story, 2015, I'm sitting in a room with a bunch of evaluators. I heard him talk about 3 players, a left-handed hitting outfielder who ran 3.9 down the line, a starting pitcher who threw 92 miles an hour, probably 93 miles an hour, was 6 foot tall, 195 pounds, and then a left-handed, just absolute beast, okay, of a human being that could throw 100 miles an hour. And I heard these evaluators speak, and they all said at different points of the conversation, they are athletic. They are athletic. They are athletic. That guy's athletic. That guy's athletic. That guy's athletic. Wait a minute. We're talking about 3 different human beings. And that's when I started to realize language matters a lot in what we talk about, because everybody has a different definition of athleticism. When you work with your coaches, okay, or if you are a coach, you see something and you describe that as athleticism. And there are many different ways to describe those things. And so what I urge you to do is think to yourself, and we don't have time for you to like do that right now, but think to yourself about what athleticism is to you. What is your definition? And when you're training somebody, what that is. And if you do work with a coach or other coaches, I highly suggest you ask them what their definition of athleticism is, because I think a lot of our issues that we have sometimes of what people think of the weight room and what people think of the training room is just a miscommunication. I work with a company called Breakaway Data. We had done a survey with our scouts with the Dodgers to understand how they described players, and we gave them 10 categories of athleticism. Okay. Strength, size, speed, power, and had them list all the words that describe those things. In those 10 categories, we got 800 words. Of those 800 words, almost 300 of them showed up in every single category. So we now realize that this is all jumbled all across the place. And so having a very, very clear and distinctive language, we haven't even got to sets and reps yet. We're talking about how we define somebody. Can somebody get off the ball? Is that athleticism? Can somebody get up to top end speed? Those are both important, but they're both completely different. How we train them, how we go about them, and probably what positions we put them in will be dictated by how good they are at those things. And like I said, whoever your final evaluator is, like Coach got up here and spoke earlier, he's the final evaluator of talent here. He has to write the lineup out. His definition of athleticism means a lot. Know that for who you're working with. A superpower, just to give you a definition, it's a characteristic that makes you skilled. Okay. So when I watch my almost 10-year-old play, I see some big kids, right? I see some giant 10-year-olds. That might be the characteristic that makes them really good right now. I also see some really small ones that are super skilled, and that might be the reason why they're good. And I see some that are really fast that just can outrun the ball. Okay. The big ones, they might not be big for long. The fast ones, they might not be fast for long. The skilled ones, I think skill can we can kind of progress that and scale that out. But understand what you're looking at. Same thing with 12-year-olds. 12-year-old that is in puberty, 12-year-old that is pre-puberty, maybe a 12-year-old that's close to being done with puberty. Okay. That really, really matters when we talk about evaluating and when we talk about training, and ultimately we talk about talent. Okay. Now we get to high school. Most kids have, are on the latter stages of puberty or starting to, maybe freshman year starting to go through it a little bit. But what is making them talented and gets them on the field? And then ultimately, what are the things that are holding them back that maybe we can still train? Okay, maybe they're really, really skilled, but they only weigh 150 pounds. Now we know, like, okay, your superpowers over here. What can we do to build you up so you don't have a kryptonite? Okay, when we get to college, and this is again, this world is college baseball is so cool to me. I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska, so I grew up 5 minutes from Rosenblatt. I would walk to the College World Series and got to see a lot of really great baseball players play. So that what got passion started with me with baseball. And I think college, because you just get so much time with them. There's just so much you get to do with them, the relationships that you get to create. And then, been able to take a lot of college baseball players and help them in the next phase of their career. And you see some of the things like that engine building and like getting after it and conditioning and mental toughness and all these things that we probably talked about today. that there is some collateral damage that comes with those things and doesn't make it bad. You just got to know the cost of doing business sometimes. So we've seen the things that we've had to fix. We've seen some programs that do it really well, like this one. We've seen some programs that don't do it really well. And we know that when we get them, we're probably going to spend more time maintaining or maintaining that engine versus actually building that out. Same thing. We take an 18-year-old kid out of high school. We have to be thinking like college strength coaches. We can't be thinking about professional strength coaches. We don't build them up like a 24, 25, 26-year-old all-star. We build them up like an 18-year-old freshman. And then lastly, the pro level, there's a wide, pro means a wide variety. Obviously it could be anywhere from 16 to, like I said, 40. But when I say pro on here, I'm thinking major league, high-end minor league player that is ready to take the next step. Understand what makes your athletes really good, really talented, and ultimately puts them on the field. That's what a superpower is. So I think a superpower is size and length. Okay, again, that 8-year-old just might be bigger. We also have just big major league players, okay, that they can get away with things because they have length. Aaron Judge is an unbelievable player, obviously. Okay. And he, there's always controversy around swings, I feel like, but will Aaron Judge's swing work for someone who's 5'9" or 5'10"? I don't know. He might be able to get away with some things. And when I look at Aaron Judge, I see a very skilled player. I see a giant engine, but I also just see a big human being that has a little bit more leeway to do things. So that's a superpower to me. If you're big and you're strong naturally, maybe the weight room isn't as important for you or shouldn't be as dense for you as it might be for somebody else. The second one is we see some kids that are really strong, okay? Just naturally strong. And I don't mean get under a barbell and push weight, but they know how to use the ground really, really well. And for me, and I've spent a lot of time with Bill Hartman and understanding the ISA model and wides versus narrows and things like that. Strength comes from the ability to push in the ground, which is internal rotation. If you can internally rotate, okay, you can get into the ground. And if you can get in the ground, it doesn't matter how big you are necessarily. Mass does matter. Okay? You do have to be tall enough to ride the ride. But you don't have to just keep adding strength and adding strength and adding strength if you know how to push in the ground really well. Also, by the way, some of those strength exercises that we use to build that strength take away from that internal rotation and you lose the ability to push into the ground. So again, know the cost of doing business. The third one is twitch. Okay. How fast can we create it? How elastic are we? And some kids, and I get a great view. I was sitting in the corner watching my son playing 10U baseball in California. We get to play year round. We'll talk about that another day. But there are some kids that just are twitchy. They just are springy and elastic and spend zero time on the ground. My son is not one of those. He's more of the strength. He's more of the force production. He's built like I am. But there are some kids that are really good at that. And then lastly is the coordination part. Okay, that's the fourth superpower. Are you coordinated? Are you skilled? I like to say, are you poetic? When I watch you play, is it fluid? Okay. And if it is, I truly believe that is something that is scalable throughout your whole career. If you're not coordinated, I believe force production, learning how to create force, allows you and buys you more time to be more coordinated. And so I think that they can kind of play off of each other. I think there's guys that are very, very specifically coordinated in one thing. Okay. And again, if we had hours, we could talk about like transferring vertical jump scores to understanding how good an athlete is going to be. Some guys, they don't jump well, but they're really, really coordinated on the field. But if I only look at their jump, that might be a problem. Doesn't mean we don't use that information. We just may have to weight it different for every individual. Worked with a lot of Latin Americans, sometimes don't have shoes, sometimes haven't played a lot of jumping sports, probably aren't going to be as good as maybe Americans are who've been able to use, Jordans and have had access to training and play basketball and play other sports that maybe they've jumped a lot. We might be identifying two different groups the same way, and that might not be working out for us. So please understand the difference between general coordination, something like a jump or running, things like that, and how important that is But ultimately, specifically, some of these guys know how to do things really, really well on the mound or at the plate or in the field, and they don't transfer to other aspects of their life. I believe there's an optimal weight and body fat for each guy. Okay. But I don't believe that that's just one number. And I think that, go back to the first slide, it takes a village. You need to understand your athletes. You need to understand how they play at certain weights, how they handle certain foods even, right? Like if I eat a lot of grains, I'm going to gain a lot of weight. Okay. I have a feeling if I look at Jose and he eats a lot of grain, he's probably not going to gain a lot of weight. We just have different body types and we have different ways that we digest foods. And so understanding that we can't blanket everything, and we definitely can't blanket a weight and say, you're an outfielder who's 6 foot, you need to weigh 185. It might not be right. I also think that optimal weight plays into our optimal force production or force velocity curve, that sometimes being a little bit lighter makes us quicker. And if twitch is our natural superpower, maybe we shouldn't just try to gain weight or gain strength for the sake of it because somebody else did, but maybe we should play a little bit lighter and we're better. I know that through failure. I know that from trying to take everybody and make them a certain weight. And I say that though, to make sure that it's okay to understand, it's okay to be pragmatic in the way that you look like this. Vice versa, we've taken some really, really big kids who are really strong and maybe don't look great in a uniform. And we say, you need to lose 20 pounds. And all of a sudden, they can't hit the ball out of the infield. And so I'll understand that there's that optimization for each player. So all of this in length and size though plays into physics, and we can't deny that. If you are a certain weight, if you are a certain length, you move the bat or your hand a certain speed, physics is going to win. That bat is going to impact the ball. And so if you do have more mass and you do move the same speeds and all things are created equal, of course we would want you to be bigger, because that's probably always going to win. So we get into my, again, very, very remedial way. Nick does like the academic version of this, makes the Orioles look really smart. I make the Dodgers look like this. But I break it down. You can be a Hulk. Okay. You can be the guy that creates a lot of force and can be a little bit bigger. And this is what we call strength. And I think Nick made a really good point of like, that's kind of a word we just like loosely throw around. What does that mean to a power lifter? Okay. What does that mean to a bodybuilder? What does that mean to an offensive lineman? Or what does that mean to a baseball player? And so understanding what that is for you, for your athletes, the sport they play, obviously we're talking about baseball and the positions they play within that. Again, strength to me, how well do we play with the ground? Okay, if we can play with the ground really well, I feel like we can create a lot of force. If we can create a lot of force, we can probably sequence well. We can probably do some things really, really well that will help us advance in baseball when we start seeing 98-mile-an-hour heaters and 92-mile-an-hour sliders that maybe we can't just cheat our way to when we're at our younger levels. And then, ultimately, if they can push into the ground really well, what is strong enough before I start robbing my tissue and I start robbing my movement capacity just for the sake of having strength. And so again, my first one is the Incredible Hulk. I've seen a lot of really, really good baseball players who are the Incredible Hulk. Albert Pujols to me was the ultimate Incredible Hulk. Okay, he could do a lot of things. He was super. I'm not saying he wasn't super coordinated. And I'm not saying he wasn't twitchy. But when you saw Albert Pujols, the machine, you saw a big, strong force production machine. Then there's Flash. Okay, and this is the elastic, twitchy guy or gal. We're talking about softball. That ultimately, for me, this one has the most room for error. Okay. I've seen athletes who are twitchy that get up to top speed that don't have to get great jumps. They can outrun the baseball. They don't have to get out of the box because they can get down the line. They don't have to be early on a heater because they're so twitchy, so elastic. They can close the gap so fast. You just have more room for error. Or they can do everything wrong mechanically on the mound, but their hand moves so fast, they can still throw it. And so this is this is the one for me that we probably describe athlete the most. When you see this one, this is the one that you go, that's an athlete. Okay. Doesn't mean they're always good at baseball, but this is the athlete. They have a lot of joint stiffness. So you do enough movement screens to realize, like, not all things are created equal. And they're the ones that the ankles are messed up and the hips are messed up and the T-spine doesn't rotate. You're like, we're going to get in there. We're going to change their ankles. We're going to change their hips and we're going to make their T-spine rotate. And then all of a sudden they're not elastic anymore. And so we've just robbed them of their superpower. So learning what's the range that they can live in to train and to play versus trying to turn them into some standard norm that we read about in the textbook. And you will learn those things. Sue Falsoni, who I worked with for a long time at Exos and with the Dodgers, she always used to talk about that optimal range for each person, that, maybe somebody had like elbow flexion like 10 degrees and they were really, really good with that. But if it got up to 15, it was a big deal. And if they tried to take them to 0, they would get hurt. And learning to live within that range to make sure that we don't lose the properties of who we are. And more importantly, in season, the tissue tolerance that we've created. Okay, we start adding, you maybe have taken 1,000 swings, but if we change your swing, you don't have a tolerance to 1,000 swings with that new swing. We have to build that back up. And it's the same thing as we're talking about movement patterns and training and ultimately, our joints. So again, the flash is the one that can do everything wrong and still make up for it. Now, I do think twitch is a commodity that depreciates. Okay. Strength and movement are probably more like a house that appreciates. Okay. Twitch is more like a car. But if you have enough of it, it doesn't mean it's going to depreciate all the way down. Okay. There are athletes that are really, really, really twitchy that can hold on to it because they held their weight, they held their body fat, they didn't do a lot of dumb training, and they do a lot of things that rob them from their ability to move. Lastly, I'm biased. So I was never really that strong, and I definitely wasn't twitchy. I like to think of myself as Batman, not only training, but in real life, but coordination. So Batman didn't have a superpower, right? Batman, he couldn't fly. He wasn't as fast as Flash. He wasn't as strong as the Hulk. Batman was just super coordinated, and he used a lot of cool tricks and a lot of cool gadgets. And that's what I think of, like, players. Like, again, we're the ultimate compensators. The greatest athletes in the world are the greatest compensators of the world. And so how do you strategize? And I don't mean mentally, I mean kinematically. How do you strategize to get the job done? And so this one is usually the one that, like, we can't make too twitchy, can't make them too elastic because they just weren't born that way. We could probably add some force production, okay, to ensure that that we give them, again, more time and more ability to get into positions to do things well. And when I think of coordination, these are the ones that we want to make sure we don't rob of what they're doing. Okay, they're really good, and we want to make sure they don't do too many reps on the field. We want to make sure that they stay symmetrical and move really well and have good, what I call movement capacity. But if we start robbing them from those things, or try to turn them into Flash, or try to turn them into Hulk, we might rob them of their coordination, or more importantly, we might hurt them. We might put them in a position where they just can't perform at all. So those are the ways that I look at athletes. And understanding this, like, you got way more knowledge from everybody else today on how to train somebody. But being able to take this first step of understanding kind of like how do we know, or why do we know this athlete is good, and being able to build off of those things even before we create the training program, even before we decide what their ideal body weight is, even before we decide what their nutrition plan or their meal plan is going to be. Let's get to know them as a human, and let's get to know them in the way that they move physically, and what are their strengths, and ultimately what are their weaknesses too. So then we can put them in positions to succeed, not only in the weight room, but you get to have some really cool conversations with your coaches about why this guy maybe needs to leg kick, Okay. Why does this guy need to have a little bit more hip turn on the mound? Why, when this guy's playing shortstop, should he set up a little bit higher? Okay. Because he doesn't know how to hinge very well. And every time we put him low, the first thing he does is just stand up. And so I use these conversations with my son's youth baseball coaches, and I use these conversations with Dave Roberts when I talk to him. So I hope I've been able to offer anything. We'd love to open it up for any questions, from the Zoom or here in person. But most importantly, this has been an unbelievable weekend for all of us, starting in Nashville. For those that were on the Zoom that are here today, thank you for joining in. And ultimately, we look forward to working with all of you in the future. And thank you for coming.